The day before graduation, I personally pushed my girlfriend toward the fake rich boy who ruined my first life. I did it in front of the Alumni Center, under the glass canopy where Northbridge University had hung blue and gold banners for commencement weekend. Students stopped, parents turned. A few seniors raised their phones. My girlfriend Audrey Hart stood between me and Derek Walsh with tears shining in her eyes, wearing the expression she always used when she wanted the world to believe she was being forced to choose. Derek stood beside his black Mercedes with one hand in his pocket, a silver watch on his wrist, and that polished smile rich boys wore when they thought everyone else was too poor to question them. In my first life, I had shouted. I had grabbed Audrey's wrist and begged her not to be stupid. Had told her Derek was lying. Had told her the Mercedes was leased, the watch was fake, the family fund was a shell company, and the overseas position he promised her did not exist. Audrey had cried in front of everyone. Derek had held her shoulder. Students had recorded by midnight. The story was everywhere. Ethan Miller humiliated himself before graduation. Ethan was jealous. Ethan could not accept that Audrey chose someone better. Ethan tried to destroy her opportunity because he could not control her anymore. 2 weeks later, Audrey and Derek used that story to push me out of my own venture project. 3 months later, Derek's fake fund collapsed. 6 months later, investors started asking where the actual technical system came from. Audrey cried in a university hearing and said I had pressured her into sharing my files. Derek said I had voluntarily contributed early research and then became unstable when Audrey left me. The university believed enough of it to freeze my graduate research offer. The accelerator withdrew my slot. Professor Harper fought for me, but Derek's father still had donor influence then, and I had given them too much private access, too many shared drafts, too many late-night emails written like favors instead of boundaries. My name was not completely destroyed. That would have been cleaner. Instead, it was stained. People stopped saying I stole. They said it was complicated. Complicated is what powerful people call a lie when they want the victim to share the blame. That was my first life. It ended years later, not with dramatic revenge, but with a quiet email rejecting me from a research partnership because of historical concerns. Regarding authorship conflict, by then, Audrey had already disappeared from Derek's life. Derek had disappeared from campus circles, and I had spent years paying for a mistake I made out of love. Then I woke up back in my senior apartment back at Northbridge back on May 18th. The day before graduation, the day everything had begun to fall apart. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My phone alarm rang at 7 a.m. The same cheap sound I had used in college. My graduation gown hung on the closet door. My engineering thesis binder sat on my desk. My old backpack leaned against the chair with the same torn strap I had sewn twice because I hated wasting things that still worked. Rain tapped against the window. A half-empty coffee cup sat beside my laptop. The wall calendar said May 18th, one day before graduation. My phone lit up. Audrey Hart, can we talk before tomorrow? I don't want us to end badly. My hand went cold. I read the message once, then again, then a third time. In my first life, I had replied immediately. Of course. Where are you? Are you okay? She had answered. Alumni Center for 4 p.m. I had gone with flowers like an idiot. No, not an idiot. A man who still fought love deserved defense. That distinction mattered. I sat up slowly. My chest felt too tight. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the sink, and splashed cold water over my face until my breathing steadied. Then I looked in the mirror. Same face, same tired eyes, same scar near my jaw from freshman year when a sensor casing cracked in Lab C. Same Ethan Miller, but not the same man. I had already lived through the consequence of mistaking warning for rescue. I had already learned that you cannot save someone who needs your truth to be wrong so their fantasy can stay beautiful. Audrey did not want to know Derek was fake. She wanted Derek to be real. That was the difference that destroyed me the first time. This time I would let her have exactly what she wanted. I picked up my phone and replied, sure, Alumni Center 4 p.m. Then I opened my laptop. Before breakfast, I revoked Audrey's access to every shared file connected to my research. Old prototype diagrams, field simulation data, pressure anomaly logs, outreach notes, grant drafts, investor summaries, pitch decks. The early version of the modular diagnostics framework she had once asked to borrow for structure. Shared folder permissions, cloud backups, lab collaboration notes, presentation drafts, everything. I changed passwords, exported access logs, downloaded timestamps, created backups on an external drive. Then I sent Professor Ella Harper a clean email. Professor Harper was my engineering advisor, and in my first life, she had been one of the only people who tried to protect me after the damage was done. This time, I was not going to make her fight with empty hands. Subject: Project Documentation and Access Boundary. Professor Harper, ahead of graduation and the Senior Venture Preview. I am confirming that all materials related to adaptive modular diagnostics for low-cost infrastructure systems remain under my authorship and the documented technical contribution record in Lab C. I have revoked informal shared access to draft materials previously used for peer discussion. No outside venture team or student organization is authorized to use my technical diagrams, field simulation data, prototype logs or funding materials. I am preserving access logs in current versions for record clarity. Best, Ethan Miller. I read it 3 times. No emotion, no accusation, no Audrey. No Derek, just record. I sent it. Professor Harper replied 11 minutes later. Received. Keep all logs. Do not discuss project ownership privately with anyone today. That was Professor Harper's version of saying she knew a storm was coming. I almost laughed. Then my hands started shaking because memory is not a clean thing. Knowing what to do does not remove the pain of why you know it. I still remembered Audrey from before Derek. The Audrey who fell asleep over flashcards in the library basement. The Audrey who cried when her first internship application was rejected and said I was the only person who made failure feel survivable. The Audrey who wore my hoodie while I explained statistics to her at 1 a.m. The Audrey who told me that when we graduated she wanted to stop hiding and finally let the world know. In my first life, I believed that meant me. Now I knew she meant whoever could take her farthest. At noon, Mike Reynolds knocked once and came in. Before I answered, he carried 2 coffees, a breakfast sandwich, and the chaotic energy of someone who had no idea the universe had reset, but would still be personally offended by it. He looked at me, then at the external drive, then at the open access logs on my screen. What happened? I said, Audrey is choosing Derek today. Mike froze with 1 coffee halfway to his mouth. Derek Walsh. Yes, the counterfeit yacht boy. I looked at him. You know. Mike stepped inside and shut the door. Ethan, everyone with Wi-Fi, basic curiosity, and an allergy to cologne knows something is off with that man. I stared at him. In my first life, Mike had found proof 2 days too late. After Audrey cried, after Derek smiled into 3 different phone cameras and let the rumor do its work. This time I asked carefully, what do you have? Mike put the coffees down like a surgeon preparing tools. Oh, I have vibes and receipts, mostly receipts. He opened his laptop. First, the Mercedes. Everyone says he owns it. He does not. The dealer posted it as part of a promotional student entrepreneur package. Derek leased it short-term through a business school alumni connection, then framed it online like a family car. He clicked to screenshots. The same black Mercedes, dealer plates partially visible under a vanity frame. A post from Derek. Weekend drive. Family office errands. Another post from the dealership, accidentally including the same VIN in the background of a promotional image. Mike continued. Second, the watch. He calls it a limited Swiss piece. It is a replica. Wrong clasp. Wrong rotor engraving. Watch forum users destroyed him in 12 minutes. He clicked again. Third, Walsh Capital Partners registered 9 months ago. Co-working address, no investment advisor filing, no fund registration, no assets disclosed. Their executive team photo is from a stock image library called Global Professionals Smiling at Windows. I stared at him. Mike clicked 1 more tab. Fourth, his overseas venture program. Walsh Global Pathways. Claims partnerships in Cambridge, Singapore, and Berlin. 2 partner logos are unauthorized. 1 program is inactive and the Cambridge Innovation Circle sent a candid email last month. I leaned back slowly. In my first life, I had gathered this information while panicking, scattered, angry. Too late. Mike had it now because Mike had been watching Derek the way engineers watch structural cracks. I said, can you document all of it? Mike's eyes lit up. I thought you'd never ask me to weaponize spreadsheets ethically. Quietly, he sighed. Less dramatic. More admissible. Fine. I looked at the folders on my screen. I don't want to expose him because I'm jealous. Mike's expression softened. Good. Because you're not jealous. You're being replaced by a PowerPoint scam in human form. I mean it. So do I. He sat across from me. What happened? You look like you already lived through this. For 1 second, I almost told him. I almost said I did. I lived through the worst version of today. You tried to help me after it was too late. Audrey cried in a hearing. Derek lied. I lost everything. Years passed. Then I woke up here. But even Mike had limits. If your best friend tells you he traveled back in time, you either call a doctor or become a podcast. So I gave him the useful part. If I react emotionally today, they will use it. If I warn Audrey privately, she will twist it. If I accuse Derek without process, he becomes the victim. Mike nodded slowly. So we let him present himself. Yes. And then we let documentation do what violence cannot. I looked at him. That was unusually elegant. He shrugged. I contain multitudes. At 3:45 p.m., I walked toward the Alumni Center. The campus was dressed for graduation. Blue and gold banners hung from lampposts. Families were already arriving with flowers and camera bags. Seniors crossed the paths in wrinkled gowns, laughing too loudly because endings make people pretend not to be scared. The old stone buildings looked warm under a thin layer of sunlight after the morning rain. Northbridge University had been my whole world for 4 years. In my first life, it became the place where people whispered when I passed. This time it looked exactly the same. That made me angrier than I expected. Places do not apologize for what happened inside them. You have to rebuild your own meaning. The Alumni Center stood at the edge of the main quad. All glass, steel, and donor names engraved on stone. I saw the Mercedes before I saw Audrey. Black polished body, hazard lights blinking at the curb like it had permission to occupy space. Derek leaned against the hood in a tailored suit, one hand in his pocket, his fake silver watch catching the light. Audrey stood beside him, not behind him, beside him. That was how she wanted me to see them. Her hair was loose over one shoulder. She wore a white dress under a light coat. Her eyes were already wet. She had prepared the tears before I arrived. I stopped several feet away. "Ethan," she said. I nodded. "You wanted to talk." Derek smiled. "Miller." I looked at him. Derek. The calm bothered him. I could see it. In my first life, I arrived already wounded. He had only needed to press. This time, he had to work harder. Audrey took a breath. "I don't want tomorrow to be awkward." "It probably will be." Her expression faltered. Derek laughed softly. Audrey continued, "I care about you. I really do. But I've been thinking about my future and I need to make choices that align with where I'm going." I said, "Derek." Audrey blinked. "I didn't say that. You didn't need to." Derek's smile widened. Audrey looked between us suddenly, uncertain. "Ethan, please don't make this ugly." "I'm not. You sound cold." "I'm listening." She hated that. Audrey knew what to do with anger. She knew how to cry against it. She knew what to do with pleading. She knew how to soften and retreat and leave a man apologizing for being hurt. But listening was dangerous. Listening gave her words no place to hide. Derek stepped forward. "Look, Ethan, I know this hurts, but Audrey and I have been talking, and she deserves a life with real opportunity. My family can help her with overseas programs, venture access, donor circles. You're a good technical guy, but you don't understand how these rooms work." That was almost word for word from my first life. A cold, strange peace settled over me. The script was real. All I had to do was stop playing my old role. I said, "You're right." Derek blinked. Audrey stared. I continued, "If Derek can give you the future you want, you should go with him." The air changed. Students near the steps slowed. A few turned. Someone whispered. Audrey's mouth opened slightly. "What? You said your future is with him." "I'm not stopping you." Derek recovered first. "Well, good to see you finally understand." But his smile was less steady now because he did not want me to understand. He wanted me to resist. He wanted a fight he could win in front of witnesses. I looked at Audrey. "Do you choose him?" Her eyes flicked toward the students watching. This was not the scene she expected. She wanted tragedy, not testimony. She swallowed. "Yes. Say it clearly." Derek frowned. Audrey's cheeks flushed. "I choose Derek. Because that's not necessary. It is for me." Derek stepped in. "Don't interrogate her." I looked at him. "I'm making sure she is not confused later." Audrey's face tightened. "I choose Derek because he understands the future I want. He has access, vision, and support. He can bring me into rooms you can't." There it was. Clean public testimony. I nodded once. "Good." Then I stepped aside. Audrey looked shaken. Derek placed his hand on her back. I watched her. "Accept it." Then I did something that made half the steps go silent. I reached out, gently took Audrey's hand from the space between us and placed it on Derek's sleeve. Not hard, not dramatic, not possessive. Clear. "If this is the future you want," I said, "go to him." Audrey went still. Derek's expression flickered. The watching students murmured. Mike stood near the side entrance, pretending to look at a campus map. Phone angled down, but recording. I looked at Audrey one last time. No anger, no argument, no warning. You're choosing as an adult. I accept that. Her voice came out small. Ethan. I said. Congratulations. Then I turned and walked away. The hardest part was the first 10 steps. Every nerve in my body wanted to turn back. Not because I wanted her, because the old version of me still wanted to save the story. Explain the fake Mercedes. Expose the fake watch. Tell her the man she thought was a door was a cardboard cutout. But I had done that before. I had given her truth before she wanted it. She turned it into control. So I kept walking. Mike caught up with me near the engineering archway soon after. He waited before speaking. Then he said, that was either emotional maturity or cold-blooded psychological chess. Both. You physically placed her hand on the fraud. I placed her hand on her choice. Mike looked back. Audrey was still staring after me. Derek was speaking into her ear. Are you okay? Mike asked. No. Good. Honest answer. I looked ahead at Lab C. But this time, I'm clean. That night, Audrey posted a photo of Derek's Mercedes. No caption, just the car, his hand on the steering wheel, her graduation nails visible near the frame. A soft announcement without the courage of words. Derek reposted it. Tomorrow, Mike sent me the screenshot and wrote, permission to vomit academically. I replied, denied. He wrote, emotionally approved. I slept 4 hours. That was 4 hours more than I slept in my first life. Graduation morning arrived clear and bright. Northbridge looked almost too beautiful. The main lawn was covered in white chairs. The stage had blue gold banners and the university seal. Families filled the pathways with flowers, cameras, and proud voices. Faculty lined up in robes. Graduates kept adjusting caps that refused to sit straight. Audrey arrived in the Mercedes. Derek opened the door for her like a prince in a commercial. She stepped out in a white dress under her black gown. Students stared. Some whispered. A few glanced toward me. I stood with the engineering graduates, calm enough that people looked disappointed. Public drama is a sport. I had refused to play. Derek walked past with Audrey on his arm. He slowed near me. Well, he said, big day. I looked at him. Yes. He smiled. Try not to change your mind and make a scene. Mike appeared beside me with coffee. He made the scene yesterday. You just didn't get the footage you wanted. Derek's smile tightened. Audrey looked at me. There was something nervous in her eyes now. Maybe because I had not chased her. Maybe because a choice stops feeling romantic when the abandoned person refuses to collapse. Ethan, she said quietly. I hope you have a good day. You too. That disappointed her. I saw it. She wanted something sharp enough to prove I still belonged to her emotionally. I gave her nothing. The ceremony began. Names were called. Speeches were given. Parents cried. People clapped for students they did not know because graduation makes strangers generous for 3 seconds at a time. Derek crossed the stage with the business graduates. Polite applause. Audrey crossed later. Louder applause. She was still Audrey Hart. Beautiful, popular, skilled at being watched. When my name was called, Professor Harper stood from the faculty row. Ethan Miller, College of Engineering. Highest distinction. Venture research candidate. The engineering section clapped hard. Mike shouted, clean logs. President Marsh looked startled. Professor Harper did not. Audrey turned her head slightly. Derek did not care. To him, highest distinction was cute, useful, still not rich. After commencement, everyone moved toward the Alumni Center for the senior venture preview and donor reception. That was the real battlefield. In my first life, the reception became the place Derek claimed Audrey publicly. I lost control. And their narrative became official before any facts arrived. This time, I walked in with Mike, Professor Harper, and 2 external files backed up in 3 locations. No flowers, no pleading, no shared folders open, just records. The donor hall glowed under chandeliers. White flowers lined the stage. Screens displayed student venture teams. Alumni donors milled around with champagne. Student founders stood nervously beside posters, each trying to look like they had slept recently. Derek's table was near the front. Walsh Global Pathways founder Derek Walsh, strategic associate Audrey Hart. The poster promised overseas venture placement, family office-backed funding, founder mentorship, and international access for elite graduates ready to scale beyond campus. Family office-backed, elite access. Derek had built a whole religion out of words Audrey wanted to believe. Audrey stood beside the table, hands folded. Her smile was polished, but her eyes were not. Derek saw me approach and smiled. You came. I was invited. His eyes flicked to Mike's folder, still carrying paperwork like a security blanket. Mike patted the folder. Paperwork has defeated better men than you. Derek laughed, then leaned toward me. You handled yesterday better than expected. Keep that energy. Don't embarrass Audrey today. I looked at Audrey. Are you embarrassed? She hesitated. Derek answered for her. She's moved on. That wasn't the question. Audrey said quietly, I'm fine. She was not, but that was no longer my responsibility. President Marsh took the stage. Welcome alumni, trustees, student founders, families, and venture partners. Today's senior venture preview celebrates the initiative, creativity, and ambition of our graduating class. She spoke about innovation, community, research, leadership, all the words universities use when donors are listening. Then she said, our first presentation comes from Derek Walsh of the Business School, founder of Walsh Global Pathways. Derek walked onto the stage with Audrey beside him. His confidence returned under lights. That was where people like Derek lived best, not in work. In lighting. He took the microphone. Good afternoon. Walsh Global Pathways was created to connect elite graduates with international entrepreneurship opportunities through private capital, family office partnerships, and cross-border venture mentorship. The first slide appeared, a world map with lines from New York to London, Singapore, Berlin, and Dubai. Audrey clicked to the next slide. Logos appeared. Walsh Capital Partners, European Founder Exchange, Singapore Venture Bridge, Cambridge Innovation Circle, Berlin Venture Fellows. 3 logos were unauthorized. 1 program was inactive. 1 had no relationship with Derek at all. In my first life, I shouted that from the floor. Nobody believed me because I sounded like an ex-boyfriend bleeding in public. This time, I stood silently near the back wall. Derek continued, our first cohort will include high-potential graduates positioned for overseas market entry. Audrey Hart will serve as Strategic Associate for International Outreach and Founder Development. Audrey smiled, her hands shook slightly around the clicker. Derek looked toward the donor tables. We are currently finalizing a 7-figure commitment from private investors with initial placements expected this summer. A few donors nodded. Someone took notes. Audrey relaxed a little. Derek had given the room what it liked, confidence before evidence. Then President Marsh said, thank you, Derek. We'll open the floor to questions from the advisory panel. A man in a gray suit near the front raised his hand. Martin Keene, real venture attorney, real due diligence specialist. In my first life, Derek avoided him until after the damage was done. In this life, Professor Harper had made sure he was on the panel. Keene spoke calmly. Can you clarify which family office has committed capital? Derek smiled. Walsh Capital Partners. Keene looked down at his notes. Is Walsh Capital Partners registered as an investment advisor, family office, private fund, or holding company? Derek paused. It operates as a private family vehicle. Under what legal entity? Derek's smile tightened. We are not disclosing structural details publicly. Keene nodded. You included the claim in a student funding presentation. The structure is relevant. Audrey looked at Derek. Derek clicked to the next slide. Let's focus on opportunity. Mike whispered beside me. Opportunity is not a corporate registration category. The next question came from Professor Harper. Your program uses the phrase confirmed overseas placements. Which institutions have signed placement agreements? Derek said we have verbal alignment. With whom? Partner contact names. He smiled. Some relationships are confidential. Keene leaned into his microphone. Not when used to solicit student participation and donor funds. The room shifted. Small change, big meaning. Investors do not panic at missing proof immediately. They get quiet. Quiet is worse. Derek's confidence began cracking around the edges. Then Mike stood. President Marsh's face tightened before he spoke. Mr. Reynolds. Mike lifted his folder. With permission from the advisory panel, I'd like to submit public documentation relevant to Walsh Global Pathways claims. Derek's face darkened. What is this? I looked at Audrey. She looked at me for the first time since I pushed her toward him. She looked afraid of the man standing beside her. Keene said, submitted. Mike walked forward and handed over the folder. Derek snapped. This is harassment. I stood. No, I said, this is due diligence. Mike's documents went onto the screen one by one. Walsh Capital Partners registered 9 months ago. Business address, co-working suite, temporary mailbox, no fund registration, no disclosed assets, no investment advisor filing, no evidence of capital commitment. Then the Mercedes short-term lease through a dealership promotional program not owned by Derek Walsh. The vehicle used in 3 social media posts suggesting family ownership. Then the watch replica model identified by serial mismatch and incorrect clasp. Then the overseas partnerships. Cambridge Innovation Circle held no relationship with Derek Walsh or Walsh Global Pathways. European Founder Exchange logo used without permission. Singapore Venture Bridge maintained an inactive program page. Berlin Venture Fellows had no registered partner agreement. Then the vendor complaint. A design contractor for Derek's pitch website had not been paid. The room went silent. Audrey looked physically sick. Derek pointed at me. "You set this up." I said, "No, you published it." Mike added, "Public claims create public footprints." A tragic theme. Keane turned to Derek. "Did you represent Walsh Global Pathways as funded?" Derek said, "We are in active discussions." When asked with whom, he offered no answer. Keane asked, "Did you promise Audrey Hart an overseas strategic associate role funded by this entity?" Audrey looked at Derek. He did not answer. Keane repeated, "Did you?" Derek's jaw tightened. Audrey whispered, "Derek." That one word was different now, no longer romantic. Terrified, Derek snapped, "Audrey, don't." The room heard him. Her face changed. The illusion broke in public exactly as mine had in my first life. But this time, I did not touch it. President Marsh stepped to the podium. "The Walsh Global Pathways presentation is suspended pending review." Derek shouted, "You can't do that." Keane said it was not approved for solicitation without documentation. Professor Harper added, "Any attempt to attach student names, projects, or university affiliations to this entity will be frozen until claims are verified." Audrey stepped away from Derek, and he noticed. "You're backing away now," she whispered. "You said your family fund was real." Derek laughed bitterly. "You wanted it real." That sentence struck her harder than any document. Because it was true. He had lied. She had wanted to be fooled. The major investment announcement began 20 minutes late by then. The room was buzzing. Derek had been taken aside by University Council. Audrey sat alone near the back, no longer on stage, no longer glowing, no longer holding Derek's sleeve. President Marsh returned to the podium with a controlled expression. "Northbridge University will now proceed with today's major announcement." The screen changed. Miller Global presents Northbridge University Research Commercialization and Student Builder Fund. Initial commitment $200 million. Audrey looked up slowly. Derek, still near the sidewall with counsel, looked confused. Then my father entered. Daniel Miller, founder of Miller Global, chairman of the Miller Future Foundation, and my father. The room stood. Audrey froze. Derek's mouth opened. Dad walked to the stage and took the microphone. "I came today to announce a fund designed to protect student builders from exactly what this room just witnessed." The silence became absolute. Dad continued. "Students should not be asked to trade their names, projects, or futures for fake access. They should not be dazzled by borrowed symbols. Real investment begins with verified work." He turned toward me. "My son, Ethan Miller, helped design the contribution integrity policy for this fund. After seeing how easily young builders can be pushed aside by people selling status." The screen changed again. Founding Student Policy Advisor Ethan Daniel Miller. Audrey covered her mouth. Derek stared at me like the universe had cheated him. I walked onto the stage. In my first life, I had stood in this room shouting that Derek was fake while everyone thought I was jealous. In this life, Derek's own documents had spoken first. I took the microphone. "I'm not interested in humiliating anyone for being fooled." I said, "Most scams work because they sell something people already want to believe." Audrey lowered her head. I continued. "But when fake status is used to take real work, real names or real opportunities from students, the answer has to be structure. This fund will require verified contribution records, real entity disclosures, and independent review before any student venture receives support." Mike started clapping, then Professor Harper, then the engineering students, then the donors. Derek walked out before the applause ended. Audrey did not follow him. That was the first honest choice she made all day. The university review began that evening. Derek tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. The Mercedes was aspirational branding. The watch was a gift. Walsh Capital Partners was early stage. The overseas partnerships were relationship conversations. The unpaid vendor was a billing dispute. The fake placement role promised to Audrey was conceptual. Every lie became softer when forced into official language. But soft lies are still lies. Martin Keane submitted a memo before midnight. His conclusion was short.
Walsh Global Pathways is not currently a verified investment or placement entity.
It should not be permitted to solicit students, donors, projects, or university affiliation without full documentation. Professor Harper submitted another memo. Hers was colder. No student venture affiliated with this entity should receive access to technical projects, student research, or university-backed presentation opportunities until authorship, entity status, capital claims, and partnership claims are verified.
Dad's Foundation Council submitted the third memo. One sentence mattered most.
The Miller Future Foundation will not fund any program, accelerator, or student venture environment where unverified wealth claims are used to pressure student builders into surrendering work, credit, or opportunity.
By morning, Walsh Global Pathways was suspended from all university activity.
Derek's Venture Society privileges were frozen.
His Student Leadership Award was placed under review. Students who had signed interest forms for his overseas program received formal warnings.
The university demanded documentation of all partnership and capital claims.
Derek could not produce it. Audrey sent me no messages that night.
That surprised me. Then at 8:12 a.m., she sent one.
Did you know?
I stared at the screen.
Not. I'm sorry. Not. Are you okay? Not. I should have listened. Did you know? I typed yes. She replied almost immediately. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at the message for a long time.
In my first life, I had told her, had screamed it. I had begged her to understand that Derek was using her. She chose his lie anyway because his lie was prettier than my warning.
This time, I wrote, you made your choice before you wanted the truth. She read it. No reply.
Later that day, Professor Harper called me into her office. She sat behind her desk with 3 folders stacked neatly in front of her. Her office smelled like coffee, paper, and quiet judgment.
Sit, she said. I sat. She studied me. You handled yesterday differently than I expected. I said, differently than I would have before.
Her eyes narrowed slightly. Professor Harper noticed language the way radar noticed storms before they arrived.
What?
I paused, then said before I understood that warning people can become another form of giving them control over your life.
She leaned back. That sounds like an expensive lesson. Yes.
She opened the first folder.
Your project records are clean. Your file access changes yesterday morning were properly logged. Audrey has no current authorization to use your technical materials. Good. I nodded.
She opened the second folder.
Derek's entity claims are a mess.
The university will separate his case from yours unless he attempts to drag your project into it.
He will. I know.
She opened the third folder.
That is why we are getting ahead of it.
Inside was a contribution record for my project.
Adaptive Modular Diagnostics for Low-Cost Infrastructure Systems.
Principal Researcher Ethan Miller, Sensor Architecture Contributor Lily Carter.
Faculty Advisor, Professor Elaine Harper. Outreach Draft Review Audrey Hart.
Limited, non-authorial, no ownership claim, no Derek Walsh, no Walsh Global Pathways. No Venture Society assignment, no ambiguity.
Professor Harper pushed it toward me. Review and sign only if accurate. I read every line, then signed. She nodded.
That is how adults handle ownership.
I almost laughed. I could have used that sentence earlier in life.
She looked at me for another second, then said, most people could.
The formal conduct review took 12 days. Derek's defense changed every 3 days.
First, he claimed people misunderstood his presentation. Then he claimed the university had approved his wording. Then he claimed Mike's documents were biased. Then he claimed I had orchestrated the exposure because Audrey left me.
That last one almost worked. Not legally, but socially. It was an easy story. The wealthy rival humiliates the man his girlfriend chose. People love that narrative.
But the timeline protected me. I had not exposed Derek when Audrey chose him. I had not posted accusations, had not confronted him publicly, had not warned her privately and then used that conversation later. I had revoked my files before the meeting. I had accepted her choice publicly.
Derek's presentation failed under panel questions before I said anything beyond due diligence.
His claims were public. His documents were public. His lies were structural.
The review board could see it.
Mike's recording of the Alumni Center conversation became useful, too. Audrey choosing Derek because he had access, vision, and support. Me saying, no anger, no argument, no warning.
You're choosing as an adult. I accept that.
The conduct officer played that line twice.
Derek's attorney tried to argue I had manipulated the scene. The officer asked, by accepting the decision? No answer. Audrey's interview was the most important. She could have lied.
In my first life, she did. This time, Derek had already been exposed before he could coordinate her story. She told the truth mostly. Dr. Levin, the independent investigator, asked her, "Did Ethan Miller threaten you after you chose Derek Walsh?" Audrey said, "No." "Did he attempt to prevent you from leaving?" "No." "Did he accuse Derek of fraud during the conversation?" She hesitated. "No." "Did he warn you?" Her eyes filled. "No. He said I was choosing as an adult." "Did Derek Walsh represent Walsh Global Pathways as funded?" "Yes." "Did you believe him?" "Yes." "Why?" Audrey looked down. "Because I wanted to." That sentence went into the report. I read it later. For some reason, it hurt more than if she had blamed me. Because truth can still hurt when it arrives late. The review found Derek responsible for misrepresentation of entity status, unauthorized use of partner logos, misleading claims regarding overseas placements, and improper solicitation of student participation under false funding assumptions. He lost Venture Society privileges. His leadership award was revoked. His endorsement for a postgraduate entrepreneurship fellowship was withdrawn. Walsh Global Pathways was barred from using Northbridge affiliation. Richard Walsh, his father, issued a public clarification that there was no Walsh family-backed venture fund connected to Derek's student program. That clarification spread faster than any official report. The Mercedes went back to the dealership. Someone filmed it being loaded onto a transport truck outside Derek's apartment. Mike sent me the video with one message. No caption needed. Then 2 seconds later, "Actually, I have 17 captions." I replied, "Do not post them." He wrote, "I have grown." He posted none. I was proud. Audrey lost less formally but more personally. The overseas associate role did not exist. Her plan to attach herself to Derek's international venture pipeline disappeared. Her attempt to use my project's outreach notes in a late fellowship supplement failed because Professor Harper's contribution record clarified her limited role. She kept her degree. She kept some friendships. She lost the story of herself she had been trying to build. That is harder than it sounds. People can survive losing a partner. They struggle more with losing the identity that made them feel ambitious. A week after commencement, Audrey found me outside Lab C. It was early evening. The campus had settled into quiet summer atmosphere. The trees along the engineering courtyard swayed in the warm wind. Construction crews were installing temporary signs for the new research commercialization lab funded by Miller Global. Inside, students were moving equipment into the maker space. Audrey stood near the glass doors wearing a pale gray dress. No Derek, no perfect makeup, no Mercedes waiting at the curb. She held a folder she never opened. "Ethan," she said. I stopped several feet away. She swallowed. "I'm not here to ask you to fix anything." "Good." She flinched. "I deserve that." I waited. "I'm sorry I said nothing. I'm sorry I chose him because I thought he had access you did not. I'm sorry I let him make me believe you were insignificant. I'm sorry I wanted his future to be real so badly that I ignored every warning sign." She stepped closer. "And I'm sorry that when you pushed me toward him, I thought you were being cruel. You were letting me make my own choice." I looked at her. "No," I said. "I was refusing to be blamed for stopping you." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." Her eyes filled. "Did you know he was fake?" "Yes." The single word hit her. "You knew?" "Yes." "Why didn't you warn me?" There it was. The question I had been waiting for. I almost smiled, but there was nothing funny about it. "I did." She frowned. "No, you didn't. Not in this life." Her confusion deepened. I shook my head. "It means you would not have believed me." She looked down for once. She did not deny it. "No," she whispered. "I probably wouldn't have." That was the most honest thing she had said to me in months. She wiped her face. "If I had chosen you yesterday, would you have told me about your father?" "Eventually." Her breath caught. "I really ruined everything." "No," I said, "you revealed everything." She looked up. "You revealed Derek. You revealed yourself and you revealed who I become when I stop trying to save people from choices they want to make." Audrey cried quietly. "Can you forgive me?" "Not today." She nodded. "I know." Then she asked, "Do you hate me?" I thought about my first life, the hearing, the lost offer, the tainted reputation, the countless nights replaying every moment, wondering why love had not been enough to make someone trust me. Then I looked at the woman in front of me in this life. She had not destroyed me because I had not handed her the tools. "No," I said. "I'm done making you that important." She closed her eyes. That hurt her more than hatred would have. Hatred still reserves space for someone inside your heart.
I had moved on. Audrey walked away this time. I did not watch until she disappeared. Mike came out of the lab eating chips. She cried. Yes. Did she ask why you didn't warn her? Yes. Classic. I looked at him. He offered the bag. Want one? I took a chip. Mike leaned against the wall. Pushing her toward him was cold. Yes. Necessary. Yes. He nodded. Good. I support cold choices when they prevent future lawsuits. By fall, the Miller Fund launched fully. The official name was Northbridge Miller Student Builder Fund. Mike called it the fake rich boy filter. Professor Harper refused to put that on any official document. The first policy rule was printed at the top of every student venture application. Claims of capital, partnership, title, and contribution must be verified before presentation. Dad liked that rule. He said it would save honest students from dishonest confidence tricksters. Mom said she preferred rules that fit on one single line. Mike said the rule needed a mascot. No one listened to him. The first cohort came through with messy projects, honest mistakes, nervous founders, and rough slide decks. Some teams exaggerated market size because every 22-year-old founder thinks their project targets a billion-dollar market after listening to one podcast. Some students listed themselves as CEO before anyone had formalized ownership. Some business students overused the word vision around engineers who had written all the functional code. But now there were checks, real entity disclosures, contribution logs, advisor confirmations, partner verification, capital claim review. No one could use a leased car, a fake watch, and borrowed logos to sell other people a false future. Not here, not anymore. That was the real difference between revenge and repair. Revenge would have ended with Derek exposed and Audrey weeping. Repair built a system so the next quiet student did not need to experience rebirth to survive betrayal. Professor Harper told me that in her office one afternoon. I had been reviewing the first cohort applications when she placed a revised policy draft on my desk. This is what matters, she said. The policy. The fact that you turned your pain into something functional instead of dramatic. I stared at her. That may be the strangest compliment I've ever received. It is high praise coming from me. I believe it. She looked toward the lab floor where students were arguing over a drone-based inspection system. People like Derek thrive when harm stays dramatic. Drama fades. Procedure remains. I wrote that line down. Mike later saw it in my notebook and said, Professor Harper speaks like a courthouse with cheekbones. I told him never to say that aloud. He said he valued his diploma enough to hold his tongue. Months passed. Audrey became a quieter presence on campus. I saw her once at the Career Center reviewing applications with a counselor. No Derek, no donor circle connections, no dramatic displays. She looked up through the glass and saw me. We nodded. That was all. It felt right. A clean ending does not always require a lengthy final conversation. Sometimes it is just two people recognizing that the old story no longer has permission to continue. Derek tried to recover socially at first. He posted motivational quotes about resilience, failure, and being targeted when you aim higher than others. Nobody influential engaged with his posts. Then he tried to launch another consulting page without using the Walsh family name. Mike found it in 11 minutes. I told him to leave it alone unless Derek began recruiting Northbridge students again. He will, Mike said. Then document. Don't create a public spectacle. Mike sighed. You've become governance Batman. Please never say that again. 2 months later, Derek sent me a message through a mutual classmate. Tell Miller he only won because he had real family wealth. Mike wanted to reply with a full analytical breakdown. I said no. Dad read the message and said people who fake wealth always think real wealth is the core advantage. Mom said it's tedious. Dad said still accurate. I archived the message not because I still cared, but because records matter. That became a habit. Maybe too rigid of a habit. But after living through a life where private confusion turned into public guilt, I preferred organized files over fleeting emotional comfort. Winter came, and the lab expanded. My own project entered the commercialization track under strict independent review. Professor Harper refused to let me skip any procedure even though my father funded the program, especially because my father funded the program. I had to submit contribution logs, technical milestones, external validation, budget details, and a founder role statement like everyone else. Mike loved that. Imagine being the heir and still drowning in paperwork. Professor Harper said that is called governance. Mike said governance is emotionally violent. She said only to the guilty and the disorganized. He looked at me. I feel attacked. You are disorganized. Exactly. Lily Carter joined my technical review team that winter.
She was quiet, brilliant, and sharper than most people realized until mistakes surfaced. In my first life, I had not noticed her early enough because I was too busy trying to rescue Audrey from choices Audrey wanted to make. This time I noticed her, not romantically at first. Honestly, Lily cared about the work itself. She did not ask me to make her look more competent. She asked me to identify where the model failed. The first time she reviewed my diagnostics pipeline, she circled 3 assumptions and said, "These will break under cold weather drift." I stared at the page. She added, "Sorry, no sugarcoating." I said, "That's useful feedback." Her shoulders lowered slightly. People don't usually welcome that much direct correction. I'm learning to value the people who critique the work instead of flattering the person behind it. She looked at me. That sounds like a lesson carved from scars. Yes. She nodded. Good scars are valuable data. I laughed for real. That surprised me. It had been a long time since laughter felt genuine instead of something I performed for the room. Spring brought the first major student showcase under the new rules. No fake partnership claims survived screening. No unverified fund names appeared on presentation slides. No business student could list strategic founder titles without showing what strategy they had actually developed. Several people complained privately that the process was too strict. Professor Harper framed the complaints not literally but in spirit. She said if honest documentation ruins your pitch needed to be ruined. Mike did make that quote into a mug. She confiscated it then kept it for herself. Graduation season came again for the first fun cohort, and I found myself standing near the same alumni center where I had pushed Audrey toward Derek. The glass canopy reflected the late afternoon sun. No Mercedes parked at the curb. No Derek leaning against borrowed metal. No Audrey with rehearsed tears, just students moving equipment, families taking photos, and a nervous founder trying to tape a poster straight. Mike stood beside me. "You thinking about last year?" "Yes." "Regrets?" I thought about the first life. How hard I fought to stop Audrey. How easily she twisted my warning into control. How much damage came from trying to save someone who wanted the lie more than she wanted the truth. Then I thought about this life, the public choice, the clear timeline, the exposed fraud, the fund, the formal rules, the lab, the quiet students now protected by mundane paperwork. "No," I said. Mike nodded. "Good." Then he looked at the curb. "You know that move was still cold." I smiled. "You've mentioned it before." I respect it more as time passes. That sounds like growth. Don't spread rumors. Late that evening after the showcase ended, I returned to my office and found an envelope slipped under the door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. I recognized Audrey's handwriting immediately. "Ethan, I don't have the right to demand a reply. I'm leaving Northbridge next month for a smaller program in Oregon. I wanted to say this before I go. For a long time, I told myself you abandoned me to Derek's lie. That was easier than admitting I chose it freely. You were right. I would not have believed you if you had warned me. I wanted Derek to be real because I wanted the version of myself that came with his connections. I am sorry for making you responsible for my choices. I am sorry for using your calmness as proof that you didn't care. I am sorry for only respecting your boundaries after they shielded you from me. You told me I revealed everything." I hated that sentence. Now I think it was the only honest gift you gave me at the end. "I hope your life stays clear from here on. Audrey." I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope. Mike came in without knocking. He saw my expression. "Bad news?" "No." "Good news?" "No." "What kind of news is left?" "Old news?" He nodded as if that made sense. Maybe it did. I put the letter in my record folder not to preserve evidence. That chapter was over. I kept it because some apologies do not erase damage, but still mark the moment someone stopped lying to themselves. That carries value, limited value, but value all the same. The night before I moved into graduate housing, I cleaned out my senior apartment. I found the old message from Audrey still archived on my phone. "Can we talk before tomorrow? I don't want us to end badly." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Not because records no longer mattered. Because this message no longer held meaning. I already had enough proof, enough memories, enough lessons. I did not need to keep the emotional trigger. I packed my thesis binder, 2 notebooks, 1 external drive, and the cracked mug Mike had given me that said, "Document first. Feel later." Terrible advice. Useful advice. Dad picked me up the next morning. No convoy, no dramatic entrance, just an old black SUV and coffee in the cup holder. He asked, "Ready?" I looked back at the apartment building where I woke into my second life. At the campus path where I chose not to intercept someone's own decision. At the engineering building where I built something better than revenge.
Yes, I said. Dad drove in comfortable silence for several minutes.
Then he said, your mother still thinks the fund name is too long.
It is.
She suggested Builder Fund.
That's simpler. I know. I told her the current name stays. I laughed. Dad smiled. After a while, he asked, "Do you ever feel guilty?" I knew what he meant. Audrey, Derek, the choice, the push, the silence. I watched Northbridge disappear behind us in the side mirror.
Yes, I said, sometimes.
Dad nodded. Good. I looked at him. Good.
Guilt can mean you still grasp the weight of consequences.
Just don't confuse guilt with personal responsibility for another adult's decisions. I let that thought sink in. Then I said, I knew Derek was fake.
Yes. I let her choose him. She had already leaned toward that choice.
I made the choice visible. You made it clear.
Outside the window, the campus gates passed behind us.
Dad continued, there is a difference
between pushing someone into danger and refusing to stand between them and the door they keep trying to open.
I looked down at my hands.
In my first life, I stood in front of that door and got crushed when Audrey forced it open.
In this life, I stepped aside. Maybe that was cold. Maybe that was survival. Maybe those two things are not always separate.
Years later, people still retold the story incorrectly. They said I exposed a fake rich boy because my girlfriend left me.
They said I used my father's real wealth to crush Derek's fake wealth.
They said Audrey got what she deserved. They said I planned perfect revenge.
They missed the core point. Revenge would require me to still care about winning the approval of onlookers.
What I did was simpler and colder. I stopped arguing with someone who wanted to misunderstand me. I stopped trying to rescue a woman who needed my warning to be false so her fantasy could feel like destiny. I protected my work. I protected my reputation. I let the fake rich boy stand in the spotlight until his facade crumbled. And when Audrey reached for him, I did not pull her back. I placed her hand exactly where she wanted it to be. In my first life, I tried to drag Audrey away from Derek's lie, and she dragged me into the wreckage alongside her.
In this life, I stepped aside.
I pushed her toward the fake rich boy she wanted. I let her choose the Mercedes, the fake fund, the fake watch, the fake future.
Then I chose my own path. People later called that cruel. Maybe it was. But there exists a kind of cruelty in letting adults face the truth they keep demanding. Audrey thought I abandoned her to a fraud. I did not.
I abandoned the role of savior for someone who needed my warnings to be wrong so her fantasy could endure.
She chose him. I chose myself.
And when the fake rich boy's world collapsed under the weight of its own incomplete paperwork, I was no longer standing close enough to be buried alongside it.
That was not revenge. That was rebirth.